I remember when I was a kid, and on Thanksgiving, all my family would flock down to Anderson, South Carolina for the family get-together every year. During those trips, most of the time I would try to get some rides with my aunts and uncles into town for some arcade games at the local mall, and it would be great. Thinking back about it, my whole childhood was honestly pretty great. Growing up in the 80s was really something. There was less robotic and high-stress life and a lot more family-oriented bonding times, and a family gathering on Thanksgiving was just one of such times. We would gather at our grandparents' house. All my uncles, aunts, and cousins would always make sure to get to their place every year. We would do a lot of fun activities up there, and most of them would happen outdoors as my grandfather wasn't very big on TV, at least not as much as the rest of us from up north. Now, there were definitely times when we could get trapped inside for a while too, and that happened when there were some huge storms on the horizon, and those were pretty frequent. We suffered through them almost every year when we were at our grandparents' house. Most of the times, there wouldn't really be huge blackouts from the storm, but this one time, we were left in the dark for a whole day and night, and then some. That's the day I vividly remember up till now. That morning, my mother went out to pick up some snacks from the store in town, and I insisted to tag along with her, and so did some of my cousins. She agreed to take us along for the trip, and we were on our merry way to town. Once we were there, we each grabbed some stuff that we wanted to get, and she let us buy one thing each. We were through most of the errands in town and were just about done with the trip when we noticed the beginning of a bad storm. It was quickly brewing just a few miles away, right in front of our eyes, and rapidly heading this way. Everyone started running to find shelter as we witnessed the monstrosity that was about to hit town. The shops started closing down quickly and people started rushing to their homes that could, and those who couldn't sought shelter from the shopkeepers that kindly let them in. My mother quickly gathered us together and we too started running for cover from all the heavy rain that suddenly started falling. We pulled up into the front yard just before the strongest winds joined in with the rain, making the storm all the worse. We all bunkered down and started settling in the place because we knew there was going to be a power outage coming our way soon. We gathered everything we might need for the day and even tried to heat up the food we had picked up from town earlier, just before we would eventually lose power. We all gathered around together in the living room, the adults as well as us kids. No one wanted to be left alone as the inevitable power outage struck. Some were even hoping to watch some TV before that window closed down too, like my Uncle Jake, who grabbed the remote and started flicking through the channels. "Hey Dad," he started. "Don't you have HBO? I'm about to miss the big fight." Knowing pretty well that no, he did not have HBO, as my grandfather was well known for not being an avid TV fan. But still, my uncle tried to get him a subscription or something every time we gathered there. He still stood firm on his decision of not to do so. As expected, my grandfather flopped down on the couch with a beer in his hand and gave a laugh at the suggestion. "You know damn well I'm not giving away my money on no reruns. Boy, put down my remote." As his voice boomed around the room, so did the cracking of thunder. We all heard the crash far away from us, making us younger ones let out a gasp of surprise. And just like that, all the power went out, leaving us in the dark. There wasn't much light left outside as nighttime was fast approaching, and what was left of the dying day was covered by stormy clouds. The storm had really darkened the day a lot, and it had caused an increase in the darkness of the room too. We didn't get to stay in the dark for too long as, like any old routine, my mother soon walked into the living room with lit candles already in hand, casting at least a little bit of light back into the room. We kids took advantage of the light as we all started to gather and sit around my grandmother. She would always tell the best stories, and we were eager to hear some. This time, though, the story did not come from her. Before we could ask her to tell us a story, Uncle Jake took the words right out of our mouths and into his own. He asked for a story for himself, only he asked our grandfather for it. "Hey Dad," he started, getting everyone's attention. "Tell us about that crazy circus story that you had an encounter with as a kid." And yes, just like that, we were intrigued. My grandfather sat back in his seat on the couch after hearing that, taking a sip out of a half-empty bottle of beer in his hand, and he was ready to launch into the story. All of us sat back and settled into our seats comfortably, knowing it was going to be a fun ride. We were pretty excited for the story as our grandpa had never told us this one before, and judging by the grown-ups' excitement and his expressions, we knew it was going to be pretty great. Only I didn't know how scared I was going to be after hearing that story. It was going to be something that I would never forget for the rest of my life. I watched him as he sat down and started pulling his sleeves back, only to reveal a long scar running down one arm. He started running his hands up and down it as if deep in thought, trying to remember the details of the time he got it. We stayed rooted to our spots, waiting for him to begin with bated breaths, but we let him gather his thoughts. He finally let go of his arm and took a deep breath. Then, taking another sip of beer, he finally began to tell us about his scary encounter at the circus.
Well now, this took place a long time ago, back when I was just a kid. At that time, I was living in a small town just outside of Atlanta, Blue Ridge, Georgia. I was just about 10 years old then, and a very curious child I was. I remember that I wanted to try every different and every new thing I could come across. It made life fun and exciting. That was also when I started seeing posters that were suddenly plastered everywhere. I didn't pay them any mind initially, but there was simply too much in number to ignore it for very long. It was a poster for a circus show. And at that time, there was no specific entertainment for the kids. No theme parks or anything situated nearby. The only special fun thing that kids could take part in every summer was that there might be an outdoor parade or a local fair passing through the towns. But a circus? That was new to us, and just as exciting, too. We didn't really know what to expect from it, and that just made it even more interesting to us. I, along with my best friend, Michael, really wanted to go to that circus. The only problem with that, we didn't have enough money to buy the tickets for us to get in. We had almost just given up on the thought of going to see the circus until something happened right on the actual day of the circus. Something that would change us forever. We were riding our bikes over to the local gas station when we saw a black truck with the circus banners posted all over it. It looked like the truck had brought in the circus equipment or something, we thought. Giving the truck some lingering looks, but finding no place to look inside, we trudged in and over to the counter. We were there to buy some snacks, after all. And a tall and very pale-faced man walked over to the counter too, just as we were buying a candy bar. And he pulled out a thick roll of money from his pocket and winked at us. "Don't worry, kids, I've got you," he said to us, and handed the money to the cashier, paying for us. "Hey, go ahead and give these kids whatever they want, and you can keep the change," he said to the guy behind the counter and turned back towards us. The guy then pulled out a handful of tickets out of his pocket and handed them over to me. "I saw you kids looking at the circus truck earlier. You looked like you wanted to come, so go ahead and bring your friends and family to the circus along with you. Have fun." With that parting remark, the man left us to ourselves and turned to leave. Michael took that opportunity to grab more candy off the counter as I watched the man walk out the door, tipping his hat as a woman entered the store. He seemed very unusual to me, but I soon forgot all about his weirdness when I realized that I was now in possession of a lot of candy and a lot of tickets to the circus. and I was beyond happy at that. Now, later that night, when I got home, I excitedly told everyone about my encounter with the man who invited us all to the circus. Alas, my excitement wasn't to last for very long. My father walked over to me, and he grabbed the tickets from my hand, scolding me in the process.
You know better than to run off with your friends and not do your work. You have to feed the pigs and finish off your chores around the farm.
That definitely dampened my mood, but it did not just stop there. He took the tickets and ripped them up, and then he proceeded to toss them in the trash, as I just stood there in shock, watching him walk out of the room. As soon as I was over my shock, I realized I wasn't really convinced and that I still wanted to go to the circus. I didn't want to miss out on this experience, so I ran over to the trash can and grabbed a few of the tickets that had not been destroyed and were still fairly intact. I then snuck out of the house and headed over to Michael's. He had met with a similar fate when he had approached his family about the trip, and now we were both planning to sneak our way into the circus anyway. Later that night, as we reached the place the circus tent was set up, we saw a large crowd of people standing in line waiting for their entry. We pulled up on our bikes and realized that we were just kids without any adult supervision. Now we started thinking, how could we get in without any grown-ups with us? So, we hid our bikes in the woods and made our way towards the back of the tent. We were peeking in through the slits, seeing people taking their seats, wondering how to get in ourselves, when suddenly a little midget clown walked right over to us, almost scaring us half to death.
"You want to get in, kids?"
he inquired, and we nodded our heads in affirmation. He told us to follow him and opened the tent from a side and walked us both in. As we entered the tent, we realized we were passing through the makeup room of the circus people. There were so many people getting ready in there. Some of them were fully in costume, like the midget that had let us in, and some of the performers were still getting ready and putting on their makeup. Not only the humans, we saw animal performers too, that were being readied for their shows. Even tigers being taken out of their cages, being prepared for the next act. The midget took us to the seating area and left us there. We were seated in the very first row. Then Michael spotted the ringleader walking to the center circle, tipping his tall hat as the crowd cheered. And it was the same man that had given us the tickets earlier.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you all for your presence here and for choosing to spend your time with us as our guests.
With that said, he took a bow and let the performance begin. It was a fun-filled ride from there on. Michael and I had never seen anything like this before, and judging by people's reactions, not many others from town had either. We were all excited to see all the entertainment. We saw performances from dancing bears, the tiger jumping through fire rings, and some funny clowns playing tricks on one another. There were even clowns who threw candy into the crowd. All in all, it was shaping up to be a great night. Right up until things started to take a turn for the worse. It all started when Michael and I noticed some men with bags on their heads, the eyes cut out. They were walking around the tent, closing off the entrance and standing in front of each exit. It struck us as strange, but we thought maybe it was part of the next performance, and got really excited instead. Only it never came. The ringleader came out once again to say his thank yous and goodbyes.
I would like to thank you all for coming out tonight, and I hope we made a good impression on you. But we've got one more act to show you just before we end our show.
After saying that, he just began taking off his jacket and his hat as we all looked around puzzled, wondering what he was trying to show us. He waved his hand around in the air as if he was signaling somebody high in the stands. In the next blink of an eye, everything turned much more sinister. We watched him scream in pain as he began to change. He changed into a vampire, revealing his large frame, and along with him his whole crew.
You all had your entertainment for the night, so now let us feast! Let us feast! Get them all!
He started laughing maniacally as he ordered everyone to jump at us and start feasting on us. The crowd went ballistic as every single performer started running into the crowd, taking out everyone they could get their hands on. The ones not taken by the performers were being attacked by wild animals that hadn't been locked up in the cages properly. Everyone was panicking and screaming, trying to run away from the sudden attacks from all sides. We were no different. The large men we had seen earlier near the entrance had now removed their hoods, showing their gothic fangs, and attacking anyone and everyone that was running for the nearest door. They weren't letting anyone out of there alive. Michael and I saw the midget that had let us into the circus earlier, standing near the tiger cage. I hadn't seen him revealing himself to be a vampire, but I could definitely see he was trying to help us.
Hurry up, damn it! Come this way!
He shouted at us, pointing towards his right and signaling for us to follow him. We ran over, and even though we were afraid of him, just as much as we were of some of the others, we took the chance of him offering his help. As if sensing we didn't really trust him, he grabbed Michael by his arms and started yelling once again, this time trying to explain himself, as well as the bloody situation we found ourselves in.
I'm not one of those vampires. I just joined them a few weeks ago, and now this. I didn't know about it. I had no idea they do this.
As he was explaining this to us, we heard someone else yelling nearby. We looked only to see the circus leader pointing at us, shouting for his minions.
Get them! Stop them now!
As if understanding the words and answering the leader's command, the tiger nearest the cage reached out and lunged at us, snatching the midget as if he was nothing but a mere rag doll. We screamed at the sight, but suddenly Michael's screams of fear turned into screams of pain and anguish. I turned around and saw that a vampire had grabbed Michael and was in the middle of trying to rip into him, as if he was a wild rabbit. I tried to reach for Michael, pulling him by his leg and away from the vampire, but I could see that it was hurting him more than it was helping him. He was almost torn apart because of it. Before I could do something to save him, another vampire joined the fray. He almost pounced on me, but fortunately I saw him coming, so I tried to duck and avoid his attack. He still ended up swiping at me, as I felt a searing pain and saw blood fly from my arm. Feeling it wise to let everything go and just save myself, My adrenaline started to kick in. Before the vampire could launch another attack on me, I fell to the ground and started crawling underneath the tent, trying to make my escape into the woods. Fortunately, I made it out of the tent alive. Unfortunately, it was just in time for me to look back and see the whole tent going up in flames, killing everyone inside. It was a sight I could never forget. I can sometimes still hear the crowd inside, screaming in pain along with the vampires and other animals that were trapped inside as well. That night, I witnessed the townspeople step out from their homes and businesses, and together, we all watched as half of our townsfolk burned alive inside that tent, killing everyone and everything inside.